We can go on, specifically about some of the mental qualities that are needed to become an international player, to become a World Cup winner, to become a British Lion. But on the British Lions, British Lions, you've been on 3 tours, played in 5 tests. The Lions, of course, are going to Australia now and again. What do you need? What do you need as a good international player to become a good, successful Lions player? What are the qualities, do you think?
Well, you've got to be adaptable, because potentially you are going to be out of your comfort zone. You are going to have challenges that you've never had before. Why do people want to play for the British Lions? And you know this, it's the pinnacle of what you can do in selection. There is no... World teams are more subjective. They're what can we muster together? We must get a good balance of countries. The Lions team is there to go and win a Lions series. So in terms of... Yeah, so it is the pinnacle as a player. So you're not going to have the luxury of maybe believing, and I never had this, but believing that you are a number 1 choice for your country. You're definitely not when you go on a Lions tour. So you have got to adapt to different cultures as well. During the tours I went on, it was an acceptance that you will get to know people who will potentially have struggles throughout the tour. Now, Welsh players, there was an element of homesick. It was due to the home family nature of Welsh people. And that's not a weakness, that's just an acceptance.
Yeah.
And that was an acceptance for us to make sure that if we recognise that, well, how can we help? What can we do? And I made some brilliant friends from the Welsh team.
Yeah.
Along the ways, to be fair, probably as a consequence of getting to know them and understand. Going back to the selection side of things, I was acutely aware that when I went on the 2001 tour that the competition I'd be coming up against, the likes of not only Lawrence and Neil, but we also had Scott Quinnell, Simon Taylor, Martin Williams, Colin Sharvis, Martin Corrie. All these guys were now the pot of quality has just gone up.
Yeah.
But there's still only the 3 slots.
Yeah.
So I had to look at what are the chances of getting into the test team, and what could I do that would make me better. And fortunately for me, there was a period of 3 or 4 weeks before the tour left where my club didn't have matches. So I very much went down the route of I've got an opportunity here to become a line-out jumper, and it very much started off as me grabbing players, and I was a bit like a windmill.
Yeah.
And then trying to flatten my way up, and thought that might get me off the floor a little bit better. But ultimately, that would give me a better chance of selection.
Yeah, because it wasn't something. It was.
It wouldn't be the strength.
It wasn't necessarily in your game, and it wasn't necessarily the strength of others.
Yes.
So that would give you an advantage.
It would give me another string to my bow, and it worked. I played, but I also took some line-out ball in test matches, which I'd never done before. So, that paid for itself.
You mentioned, there's 4 different cultures, 4 different nations coming together and having to blend or gel as quickly as possible, to achieve a goal of winning a test series. In terms of selection, and again looking ahead, Warren Gatland, is it all about picking the best players available to him who are playing at the moment, or is it about having the right blend of players, or a combination of the both? How do you see that?
Ultimately, you've got to go for the best players, but there has to be a consideration within it of the culture, the environment, which I think is massively important regardless of who your team is. And it will vary because it's a short tour, it's a short group of players. They don't have to be best mates in 2 months' time, like maybe a national team does. But there does have to be the element of harmony on a tour, a short tour. You have got, and I say egos in the most positive way. Players, everyone who goes on the plane believes they're good enough to play a test. So that breeds excitement, competition, but at some point there has to be a disappointment. So you've got to deal with that, and it's got to be dealt with sensitively, but also it's got to be forgotten pretty quick because the test team have to perform. And if you're carrying disappointment, you've still got to help that team perform, because ultimately you may not be involved in the first test, the second test, but you could come on in the third test. And that could be the turning point. And you could be a positive influence or a negative influence now. So you've got to make sure you've got the right people who are prepared to be in it, and potentially may have to be in the midweek team for the whole scenario, but it'll be the positive, the confidence that comes from that midweek team. And 97 was a classic. The midweek team put on, and I say the midweek team, there wasn't a clear midweek Saturday team, but every team the team played in the midweek, they would perform outstandingly, which meant the boys who played on the Saturday had to perform outstandingly, and some of the boys on the Saturday might have to play the next Wednesday to play outstandingly. To which the other guys knew, oh my God, if I want to test place, and it just became a rolling effect. The players going from one to the other.
I mean, 89 years ago, it was very much the same. It got to a point where there was, towards the end of the tour, second, third test, leading up to that, there was more or less a defined midweek team and a Saturday team. There was some crossovers, but it was the way they performed and the way they collectively got involved with the whole group that made the tour a success. I think personally, I think that is key. Warren Gatland has to take that into account when he's selecting. He will pick the best available players, but you might have one or two who sort of, come in purely to ensure that there is harmony in the group. Leadership is important. There's a lot of good leaders within the British Isles. You're Brian O'Driscoll, or whether it's Ryan Jones, Sam Warburton, Chris Robshaw. How important was, on the tours that you went, how important was the captain, the tour captain, the man who sort of had to stand up there and deliver a speech before the game?
Massively important, because they become a figurehead. They become a figurehead within the media. They become a figurehead within the country that you're visiting, and they become the figurehead of you as individuals. They're your spokesperson, but they're also your motivator. They have to be respected by all, quite clearly. And it's a massively important decision to get that right, because as Warren will pick his squad, but he'll want one person to be the voice and the collective leader, and ideally, yes, that person does need to be pretty much nailed on for a test start. And the difficulty is this few and far between who can guarantee that status.
How do you see this tour going? What would you expect from it? How do you think it'll go? And I suppose I'm not saying give advice to Warren Gatland, but I mean, what if you were in his position, what would you be looking for leading up to that and doing it? Was that a tough question?
There's a lot of answers, aren't there? The first bit is about he's got a limited period within. I think it's a training week here in Wales, and there's a few days over in Ireland before they go out to Hong Kong for the first game against the Barbarians. And there's going to be a fine balance reached between players that have had a long season, between freshening them up, doing some basic training that sets and defines a potential philosophy of how they want to play. But you've also got to bond the players instantly. You've got 4 countries that for the past 4 years have been beating each other up constantly. In this day and age, it's not only just during the Six Nations, it's European matches, LV Cup, Rabo Direct 12, it's constantly competitive against one another, and potentially there's one or two unhealthy rivalries that have to be forgotten about instantly. Now, you choose how you do it, whether it's standing on crates or whether it's emptying crates. You choose your way of doing it, don't you? I think there's a mix and a balance that has to be reached on that. So that by the time they reach Hong Kong as a minimum, there's a camaraderie that's already developing, an understanding and a friendship almost, but whilst also being competitive for desire to want to start test matches and win test matches. Once Australia comes, I mean, obviously the media will then start building up. Australia will poise themselves to, for the stories, for the angles, to try and spread the seed of doubt. And it's about keeping the lid on that and making sure that there's confidence and belief from Warren to his players. There'll be times where things don't go right. There might even be an unfortunate case of not winning a match. There are very few tours, Lions tours, in fact there's only been one, isn't there, that's been 100% successful. Some have gone nearly, but it's about making sure, as with all things, that you take on, even in wins, the bits that you can learn and get better with.
How do you think you'll approach it rugby-wise? What sort of approach, knowing the way that Australia have played over the past, say, 12 months?
Well, Australia are going to want to play a loose game. They won't want to get into an arm wrestle, and certainly within the British and Irish teams, you've got players that are more than capable. So I don't think we can we can't lose focus of the fact that keeping the game tight at times and being very direct and confrontational, that's not an issue. It's about making sure you put Australia on the back foot. And then, if opportunities come, I mean, there are some outstanding individuals who can create something from nothing. That's not to say go to a dull and boring game. It's just picking the fight, picking the opportunities. At the moment, where Australia are going, I mean, they're not going to play their test players for 3 weeks before it. After this morning, it might be worth withdrawing them already. They might have lost another one. Berwick Barnes maybe out.
Never. I wasn't aware of that. But they weren't playing. Do you think the Lions will do it?
I certainly believe that. It's well within, and I'd be confident the Lions winning. Australia have just got an uncanny knack and ability to be able to peak when they need to, and they're very good at not necessarily having the best build up to World Cups, yet being in there to win it, and obviously have won it a couple of times. They'll go to any length that they can. In 2001, what was an outstanding first game where they'll say they came into it undercooked. The Lions we had an outstanding win that first test in Brisbane, but it felt like a home game. Now Australia didn't allow that to happen again. Now the numbers never diminished in Australia in terms of Lions supporters, but all of a sudden there was the gold scarves, the gold hats, all came out.
It was there for that one.
All of a sudden, Australia felt like they had more support. They brought in a Australian singing group, choir to sit, and made them all gold, made their voices heard. And then by the time you got to the third and final test, you'd have been forgiven for actually knowing there were any Lions supporters in there, because they were in both end stands and the lights were turned off. So you just couldn't see the red. So that was that's the psychology of sport, and how you can try and influence and use your home advantage to.
And for one, I can expect the same.
Of course.
Even more so. They would have learned lessons from the last tour.
But have the Lions learned? What will come back at them?
That's the key.